Coming up, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to deal a devastating blow to businesses throughout our state, and Hoosier farmers are not immune, facing volatile markets and disrupted supply chains. We have more on the economic impact and how the pandemic is pummeling pork producers.
I'm Mary Rachel Redmond at Taylor Farms in Monroeville, where one Indiana pig farmer got creative and turned to social media to stave off the economic effects of COVID-19. That story coming up.
And the preliminary findings of statewide research on the prevalence of COVID-19 in the general population is now out. In the Business of Health, Kylie Valletta talks about key findings of this important study with its principal investigator. We will have details on those stories and much more ahead on this edition of Inside Indiana Business. Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gary Dick. Empty shelves can be frightening, but empty fields and barns would be devastating. Now, that quote from the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation underscores the sense of urgency and the concern in the nation's agriculture community as the severe economic consequences of the coronavirus pandemic continue to be felt all over the country and in every corner of our state. According to the Farm Bureau, the beef industry expects more than $13.6 billion in damages from the pandemic. Meantime, pork producers expect more than $5 billion in additional losses throughout the remainder of the year. Now, for pig farmers in Indiana, the temporary closure of two of the state's largest pork processing plants, Tyson in Logansport, Indiana Packers in Delphi, has created a huge backlog, forcing farmers to keep animals on their farms longer, spending more money to do so, or consider other alternatives. Indiana Pork Checkoff Director Jeanette Merritt tells me the pandemic's economic punch is hitting at an already challenging time for agriculture.
Last year, if you look back to spring of 2019, planting season was terrible. People put crops in the grounds in July, and it was a very stressful time. Crop prices have been low. There were trade disputes last year where pork producers lost some of our markets where typically we would be able to send pigs. So we were looking at 2020 as a year of renewal, and spring is always a season of hope for our pig farmers that also plant crops. Planting a crop in the ground and watching it grow, that you just always think of spring as the season of hope when we're going to be able to do that. So this pandemic really put another nail in the coffin for agriculture and for our pig farmers.
Merritt says a slight silver lining is that with limited production now resuming at Tyson and the Indiana Packers, markets for Indiana pig farmers are slowly beginning to open back up. But we found one Indiana pig farmer in a tiny town outside of Fort Wayne in Allen County who isn't waiting for packing plants to return to full capacity. He's turned to social media to sell hundreds of hogs that would otherwise be euthanized. Around Indiana, reporter Mary Rachel Redmond traveled to Monroeville to find out how Taylor Farms is moving swine to market through the palm of their hand.
For over 46 years, Rick and Katrina Taylor have been independent pig farmers in Allen County. Normally, the Taylors would sell their hogs to Tyson Fresh Meats in Logansport, but given the plant's recent coronavirus outbreak, Taylor Farms found itself with nowhere to sell its pigs.
It's going to take a while because they're only able to run one shift. Just can't get enough employees in there. Some of them are sick and can't work. It's just difficult, very difficult.
But when the Taylor's youngest daughter, Emily, secretly published a Facebook post advertising that her parents' Monroeville farm had 1,200 hogs for sale, the unthinkable happened.
Taylor Farms. We're getting 128 calls, and I'd say 99% of them people are going to take a hog. Anywhere from 1 hog to 80 hogs. I've had calls from Alaska, Florida, California. Okay. A lot of people come from Michigan. We've probably sold over 200 head there.
Since Taylor Farms' initial Facebook post on April 30th, folks have been flocking to Monroeville to buy pigs. In fact, Taylor tells me he's averaging 400 hogs a week. One of his customers is Chris Brown, a fellow farmer who owns a 10-acre farm in nearby Auburn.
Got a hold of Rick 2 weeks ago now. Bought 2 hogs already. Those are already all processed and sitting in my cooler. And came back to get 2 more. The whole reason why we're here is to help out another farmer. And quite honestly, I hope this is a growing trend for the future, because I'd much rather buy hogs off of Rick than get it from the grocery store prepackaged. A little more work to it, but again, the rewards. And if you only do it twice a year for a family of 6, which was what I have, it makes more sense. Just appreciate what Rick's doing, and I hope we can continue buying straight from the farmer. Great way to do it.
There's a certain point where you lose less money if you just euthanize them. I'm so glad that the people bought them. We didn't have to do that. It's been good for everybody.
While farmers across the U.S. are dealing with too much livestock and nowhere to take it, thanks to social media, Rick and his wife have figured out a new way to do business. And it's right in the palm of their hands.
They call me, text me. I have something already made up as a text, and then I just copy it and paste it and send it to them. And then they text me back how many they want, when they'd like to pick them up,
yeah, have a great day,
and their name. And then my wife does the scheduling.
Let's go with about 10.
Then they show up, and we just load them up.
And Rick tells me his orders are booked out for the next 2 weeks. And the week after that, the Tyson plant in Logansport told him they'll need a load.
We're set. I mean, I went from depression to happy.
Mary Rachel Redman, Inside Indiana Business.
All right, Mary Rachel, thank you. Well, going back to work, it's going to be a much different experience than it was 3 months ago. So how do you do it safely? The Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, Cummins, and other business leaders have come up with a playbook to help. I'll talk with Cummins CEO Tom Linebarger and Central Indiana Corporate Partnership CEO David Johnson when we return. It's time to go inside innovation, brought to you by Allegiant, pioneering safety. Well, as Indiana businesses begin to reopen, the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, in partnership with Cummins, have released guides to share emerging best practices for reopening the workplace, whether it's the shop or warehouse floor, the office, or a service center. These are all unprecedented times, this time of COVID-19. And I'm pleased to welcome to the show CICP CEO David Johnson and Cummins CEO Tom Linebarger with more on these playbooks and how they can make a difference for Hoosier businesses. They're joining us via Skype. And gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Gary.
David, I'll start with you, David, to kind of tee things up. These playbooks, why create these? And as I understand it, they are really in-depth. They're not just checklists, and they are some of the most, perhaps the most in-depth playbook for reopening in the United States.
Gary, they are. Thank you. The reason is, unfortunately, that we live in an era of COVID-19 that may go on for some time. Until there's a vaccine, we could be looking at another year, 18 months or more. We have to have social distancing and a lot of different things in our lives that none of us are accustomed to. And Tom Linebarger and his team at Cummins, who have been living with COVID-19 really since January when it affected their operations in China, have really given a lot, both to the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership and to the community and the state, by helping to think through and work through what you actually would do if you were trying to go back into the workplace and make it as productive as it can possibly be in an era of social distancing. And these playbooks they reflect deep experience from Cummins. They reflect the best wisdom that's available publicly. They're linked to the Centers for Disease Control websites, which is important because they'll continue to be updated with that information as we go. but there are rich documents that reflect just incredible amounts of good judgment and wisdom and practical advice on how to do something really hard.
Yeah, and really hard indeed. And Tom, I don't envy you and others at Cummins and the job you have before you from a manufacturing standpoint, from an office standpoint, and that breadth and size of the challenge, I think really positions you very well to contribute to this playbook.
Unfortunately, that's true. We have been dealing with the significant challenges of this pandemic now, as David said, since January in China. And our workforce has just reacted with innovation, enthusiasm, and a real sense of duty about how to create a safe workplace where their members of their family that work for Cummins all feel as safe as they can feel under the circumstances. And they're all been at it really for months now, kind of come up with the best practices they could find. And we have, these practices aren't all developed by Cummins by a long shot. We basically talked to every one of our suppliers, customers, peers, and said, tell us all the things that you're doing. And we researched all those. We put in place practices for how to keep social distancing in a manufacturing plant. That often means relaying out the line and changing the way work is done at the plant. We talked about protective equipment, like when you should wear masks, when you should wear something even more protective if you're going to be in contact with somebody or close to somebody for more than once in a day. And then also screening, how do we do screening questions? How do we get people in and out of the door without them coming in contact with each other? There's just so many details to think about that we compiled all this work together, and we were looking at it together, reviewing it in one of our meetings when I said to the team, I said, this is really great work. And there's a lot of companies out there that have to practice the same practices and maybe don't have the resources that Cummins has. Let's see if we can share some of this back with them. And that's when I started talking with David and the people at CICP, and the rest is the work that their team has done to make it applicable for businesses of all sizes in Indiana.
Yeah, real resource. David, unfortunately, we're very short on time, but these playbooks deal with manufacturing, logistics, the office environment, sales and service operations. Very quickly, how can folks access this content, these playbooks?
They can be directly accessed and downloaded on our website, CICPindiana.com.
All right, this real resource, these playbooks for businesses of all sizes and across all sectors. David Johnson is the CEO at the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. Tom Linebarger, the CEO at Cummins. Gentlemen, thank you both very much, and thanks for the work you're doing as well.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks for having us, Gary.
All right.
Thanks, Gary.
Well, just how widespread is the coronavirus? The numbers are in from the first round of COVID-19 testing done by researchers at the Fairbanks School of Public Health. They may surprise you. Business of Health reporter Kylie Valletta joins us next with that story. Well, state leaders have said from the earliest days of the pandemic that data would be the key driver in decision making. Newly released study results provide the clearest picture to date about COVID-19 in Indiana, according to Hoosier public health experts. And Business of Health reporter Kylie Valletta is here now with more. Kylie.
Thank you, Gary. The Indiana State Department of Health and the Fairbanks School of Public Health at IUPUI are releasing the preliminary findings from the first phase of a scientific study to measure the spread of COVID-19 in Indiana. This first wave randomly sampled nearly 5,000 Hoosiers. Here to highlight some of the most important findings is Dr. Nir Menachemi, professor and Fairbanks Endowed Chair at the Fairbanks School of Public Health. Dr. Menachemi, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
This study is getting national attention. So before we talk about the key findings, explain why this study is so meaningful, even on a national scale.
So, it all comes down to testing. And right now, by and large, almost all the people that have been tested for COVID-19 have been symptomatic or other high-risk individuals. Because we started off by having a limited number of tests, we had to prioritize it to the people who were the sickest or at highest risk. And so as a result, almost all the information we know about the disease comes from a very limited population. We know that there's an asymptomatic version of the disease that lots of people could be infected with, and we know almost nothing about those people. And as a result, it becomes very difficult to know what the true mortality rate is or how many people have been infected if we're only testing a limited number of sick people.
Okay, so let's drill down to Indiana. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and understand what they all mean. What are the biggest takeaways from this study?
So one of the biggest takeaways is that less than 3% of people in the state have been infected by the end of April. So lots of folks thought that maybe because the healthcare system had been challenged. I don't think we toppled over the healthcare system like we saw on the news in New York City and in other areas of the world, but we certainly challenged the healthcare system. And as a result, people thought that maybe a greater number of people would have ultimately been infected for that to have occurred. But it turns out our overall population prevalence was pretty low, suggesting that the vast majority of people in the state are still susceptible to infection.
All right, and given our business audience, let's focus on that angle for a minute. What is the message to state leadership as they're making decisions that impact Indiana businesses? And what's the message for employers and business leaders in Indiana?
So I think we bought some time. All the hunkering down that I think came at immense personal, economic, and other costs to everyone involved bought us some time. I like to think about it as we just won a small battle in this ongoing war with the virus, but the war is not over. I think employers are now going to increasingly play a larger role, given that we're slowly reopening the economy. There's a need for hypervigilance, especially by employers who have employees and customers to be thinking about. If we not adhere to the absolute highest vigilance of public health and hygiene and all the different things that we know can slow the spread of the virus, we might lose the ground that we gained by hunkering down.
Okay, just a few seconds left. What is phase 2 going to tell us when that starts in early June?
Phase 2 is going to allow us to see, after we open up businesses and slowly move the economy out of park into drive, how much the virus has spread, how many more people have become infected, how many people have been infected and recovered, and it'll tell us how well we're doing at that point.
Okay, Dr. Minikemi, thank you so much for joining us today. We're already out of time. Great study, and thanks for sharing it with us. Gary, back to you.
All right, Kylie, thank you. And we'll be right back. Stay with us. Here's what's making news now around Indiana. Anxiously awaiting getting back to work. That's the business vibe in northern Indiana, according to South Bend Regional Chamber CEO Jeff Ray, who says the region continues to feel the economic impact of the pandemic in several ways. Take the University of Notre Dame, the second biggest tourist attraction in the state of Indiana. With no graduation, hotels, restaurants, and other small businesses have missed out on a big payday. Each Notre Dame football weekend represents about a $19 million economic impact, and there's uncertainty about whether there will be a season. But Ray also says he's still getting economic development calls from companies perhaps looking for a new normal post-pandemic.
You know, people have located in major metro areas before. Now we're taking a closer look at places like South Bend and wondering if an opportunity like South Bend might be better for them. Not quite the high concentration of people. Taxes are a little bit lower, a little bit affordable. You get the Indiana business climate, one of the tops in the country. All those are advantages that we're trying to sell.
Meantime, in southeast Indiana, a region that was on a roll has slowed a bit because of the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, the Ohio River Bridges Project and the massive River Ridge Commerce Center were fueling economic development momentum in the region. Last year, Louisville-based PharmaCord announced plans to invest $52 million and add 850 jobs at River Ridge, which is now home to more than 50 companies, including Amazon, GE Appliances, and Tenneco. One Southern Indiana CEO Wendy Dent Chesser tells me calls are still coming in despite the crisis.
We've had a couple of projects put on hold, but certainly not the majority. And those that are interested in moving forward are looking more at the existing buildings, which tells us that they're in a they're going to be interested in the sense of urgency and moving forward quickly when they do decide to pull the trigger. We may also be able to look at providing more opportunities for companies virtually. So how do you get them to look at the projects and the sites on a virtual way, since they may or may not be able to get here for travel restrictions?
My sources in Southeast Indiana tell me to expect a couple of substantial economic development projects that have been in the works for some time to be announced perhaps soon, so stay tuned. Well, this time of year, Westfield is usually bustling with activity in town and at Grand Park, one of the largest youth sports complexes in the entire country. But the COVID-19 pandemic has forced athletes to stay home and the fields and courts to go silent. With more on the economic impact the pandemic is having, I'm pleased to be joined now by Westfield Mayor Andy Cook. And Mayor, as always, welcome back to the show.
Hey, always a pleasure, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get right to it. I want to talk about what's happening process-wise there. But how about the impact? Because I know you have indicated about $1 million impact through May 10. There are others out there, this doesn't come from the city, who've suggested through June 10 it could be an $85 million impact on the community. How substantial is it to the restaurants and hotels and others who benefit from Grand Park?
It has a huge impact, just like this whole COVID situation. But yeah, the 85 million or more, it's not just Westfield. I mean, our economic impact is really throughout all of central Indiana. So it is very widespread, and we're very interested in getting back open gradually within all of the guidelines the governor has presented us, and we are working through those issues right now.
Okay, Grand Park has really helped to transform Westfield without question. I know you're anxious to get things open. As you say, in a phased-in approach, you have questions right now that you and other mayors, I think, around the state want to get clarified.
Yes, you know, as we look at these sports facilities, whether it is a massive business such as ours, being the largest facility of youth sports travel in the country, or whether it's a small set of diamonds in rural Indiana, we have two issues we really need to deal with, and that is the different dates that the governor has given us doesn't have good definition as to how much space those people can occupy, such as the next date, we can have 100 people per facility, properly spaced, etc. But does that 100 people, does that count on just 2 acres, or does that count, in Westfield's case, Grand Park, over 400 acres?
Right.
So you can see there's a huge difference there. The other area we need to look at, and speaking with my mayors, as I did all across at least central Indiana this morning, many of their rec fields and some of their revenue-producing tournament fields are located on school property, which under the current guidelines is defined as they are not open till June 30th.
Yep.
So we formed really a statewide group that William Knox, our director of Grand Park, has put together, bringing together a lot of our sports-oriented people all across the state. Yep. And we're asking for some clarification.
Okay.
We're not asking for changes in dates, whatever.
Mayor Andy Cook from Westfield, big reopening strategy I know you have there. We'll be following the story. Appreciate you taking the time to join us this week.
My pleasure.
Well, how do you go from helping thousands of kids learn about bicycles and health to transporting up to 200,000 pounds of food throughout the state each week? Indianapolis nonprofit 913 Sports found a way. CEO Tom Hanley joins us to explain his company's new mission during the pandemic.
One-point game. Maddie. And one? Are you kidding me?
Well, something we haven't witnessed in a while, real-time sports highlights. Now, these are from the hugely popular and fast-growing billion-dollar business of esports. Last year, when the Pacers NBA 2K teams played against one another, it was a face-to-face in a New York studio. Now, that won't happen at least for the first 6 weeks of this season. Athletes are competing remotely, but it does give them one distinction. They're really the only team in town whose season has actually started. And for more on the Pacers esports game plan during the pandemic, we turn to Inside Indiana Sports contributor Bill Binner. Bill, over to you.
Gary, thanks. And certainly a pandemic was not in the NBA's thinking when it began the 2K League 3 years ago. But here it is, giving sports star fans teams to watch and root for as we wait for some semblance of normalcy. And joining us today to discuss our local team, Pacers Gaming, is the general manager and coach, Evansville native Cody Parent. And Cody, welcome to the program. Certainly interesting, very interesting developments. You're used to the virtual world. Many of us are getting used to the virtual world, but even within the NBA 2K, things have changed this year because you used to go to New York on every weekend to play, and now you're competing, everybody's competing remotely. Talk about how that format's playing out.
Yeah, first, thanks so much for having me, Bill. Like you said, we get to play in the virtual world. The Pacers, unfortunately, aren't on the hardwood, but our guys can compete anywhere. And we've been playing the first 2 weeks of the season remotely here in Indianapolis at the player apartments here in downtown. And it's been a blessing. We're thankful to be in this position to have the opportunity to even play. So right now we would be in Las Vegas playing in our second tournament of the year, but we play the Hawks on Friday night here from Indy instead.
And normally it's it's head-to-head, one game. This year, wins and losses are determined in a best-of-3 series, and again, that's a very interesting twist on your season.
Yeah, it's different for us. Usually in New York, we get up on the stage. It's 5-on-5. Each player controls their own position. It's heated. Sorry, Bill?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Sorry about that. Usually in New York, it gets heated, 5-on-5, face-to-face action. And now that we're playing remotely, it's a little different. And we have to be able to adjust to that situation. But again, just a wonderful opportunity that we're thankful for to be able to play.
And another thing with virtual sports, you said even as we come on the air, your team is having a scrimmage or an exhibition game with Knicks Gaming.
Yeah, 2 o'clock we started this afternoon playing against the Knicks. Usually we play 2 to 3 scrims every single day between scrims. Yes, that's the word we like to use, scrimmages online, and we get those best of 3 practice games in like you were talking about. So it is an adjustment to have to play a best of 3 scrimmage, but because we are able to play any team anywhere in the country online, we're able to adjust and get ready for whoever we play that week.
We're talking with Cody Parent, the coach and general manager of Pacers Gaming. Where can people go to watch Pacers Gaming or any one of the other, I think, 22 NBA 2K teams?
Yes, sir. On Tuesday nights, we now play on ESPN2 at 7 o'clock, so you can turn into ESPN2. We're always on the ESPN app as well, and on twitch.tv/NBA 2K League or youtube.com/NBA 2K League. And we play Tuesday through Fridays. You'll see games across the league starting at 7 p.m.
And Cody, again, esports is taking off in a variety. It's already taken off in a variety. But kids now, they're playing in high school. They're getting college financial aid to play. I mean, it is really a very interesting phenomenon.
Yes, sir. Hundreds of colleges across the U.S. are now offering esports scholarships to play on their teams and club teams. Here locally, there's the Indiana High School Esports Network that started out of Tipton. I have a buddy who I've helped and he's helped me scout some 2K players who are up and coming in his ranks, and they run a variety of leagues and tournaments across numerous games in the esports world. And then Butler, IUPUI, IU, Purdue all have club teams now and are developing their students into the future esports athletes for our world.
Okay, Cody, and as we wrap up, again, 6 weeks probably for this current format, maybe or maybe not go back to New York, but no matter, you can have a total full season.
Correct. Yeah, we could play all 19 of our regular season games online if we need to. These players are competing for $1.4 million for the season, so there's a lot on the line, and we're excited that we can start. Hopefully, we can get to New York, but depending on how the coronavirus shakes out, how the pandemic continues to shape and form over the next few months, we'll see. But if we have to compete online, we'll do whatever it takes to represent the Pacers, represent Indianapolis, and compete at the highest level.
Well, Cody, we certainly appreciate you coming on. The coach and general manager of Pacers Gaming, good luck as the senior season continues, and hopefully we will virtually see the team in New York at some point. Gary, back to you.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, Bill, thank you. Well, Indiana sportsbooks last month generated their lowest monthly revenue total since sports betting began in Indiana last October. The state saw $26.3 million in sports wagers in April. That's a nearly 65% drop from the previous month. The April numbers followed the 60% drop in March sports wagering revenues. The numbers come as Hoosier casinos remain closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as most major league sports leagues as well. PlayIndiana.com says Indiana did benefit from being the first state to allow betting on professional sports drafts, with the NFL and WNBA drafts taking place last month. Well, Mad Anthony's Children's Foundation says the coronavirus pandemic has caused it to call off its largest charity event of the year. It's a huge, high-profile event in Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne-based foundation says it's canceling the 2020 Charity Classic and Red Coat Dinner scheduled for mid-June. The foundation cites the continued uncertainty surrounding COVID-19, as well as Governor Holcomb's back-on-track guidelines as primary reasons for canceling the event. It raises millions of dollars each year for charitable organizations in the Fort Wayne area. The foundation says it hopes to still be able to present a gift to the Mad Anthony's Hope House and is looking forward to the event in 2021. Still ahead, Mad Anthony's isn't the only charity, unfortunately, feeling the sting. Organizations like Gleaners Food Bank and other local nonprofits are struggling to survive. Our special COVID-19 economic panel is here with why it's important for Hoosier businesses to lend support. And up next, how an Indiana nonprofit has shifted gears from the bicycle business to becoming a food delivery service thanks to one of their main assets, their fleet. Details on 913 Sports, its new mission, when we come back. Well, imagine moving to Rome at the beginning of March when the pandemic started to really spike there, to start a new job, and a big job at that. That's what former AgriNova's CEO Beth Bechtel did as she began her new role as Deputy Director General of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, which is headquartered in Rome. Bechtel is part of a team that oversees some 13,000 employees in more than 180 countries around the world. Their mission, provide food support to impoverished communities. Bechtel says the coronavirus is adding to an already huge problem in Africa and South Asia.
We have a locust plague, like grasshopper locusts that are devastating. I mean, several countries, crop production, their pasture production. I mean, it is devastating in terms of the impacts that it's having on that particular region.
Wow, amazing pictures. Bechtel says COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions have made it harder for the FAO to assist areas dealing with the locust plague. Well, just 3 months ago, 913 Sports was operating like it had for the most part of the past decade. The Indianapolis nonprofit would load up bicycles on its fleet of trucks and head to schools, community centers, and parks to teach kids about the health benefits of bikes and a lot more. But then the coronavirus hit and schools and community centers shut down. That's when the organization decided to shift gears and help the community in another way, by using its trucks to deliver thousands of pounds of food to those in need. 913 Sports CEO Tom Hanley joins me now with more via Skype from his distribution center on the near northwest side of Indianapolis. And Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Gary. It's great to be back.
Okay, this is an amazing story. First of all, 913 Sports in and of itself, a great business story. You started the company about 8 years ago. Talk about really the business model, if you will, behind 913 Sports and what that has been all about.
Yeah, so 913 Sports is focused on using the bicycle as an education tool. We built our history and our relationships with schools all across central Indiana. And ultimately have grown to the point where, as of 2019, we were serving almost 60,000 students a year with a variety of programs. Those that not only get kids riding bikes, but teach kids how to build bikes and work with their hands.
Yeah, so again, we're looking at some great video there. Again, teaching kids actually how to build bikes, but there's also the health component, and that fits right in to the sweet spot of what so many schools and organizations need. And you've been able to tap into that and really grow your organization.
Yeah, it's been great to be able to do something that goes to the kids, to the students, to the community. That was really the founding principle, and what's made us so successful is the fact that our entire curriculum was built to be able to go out to where the kids are and be able to serve them at their community center or at their school. And really, that created the framework for where we are today in this the middle of this COVID pandemic.
Well, the pandemic has forced so many businesses, obviously, to pivot, including yours. Talk about that, I guess you could call it maybe the aha moment in March when you decided it maybe made sense to make a little pivot.
Yeah, so for us, what we do on a daily basis would not be possible without my incredible team that makes what we do happen. The personalities that not only get the kids riding bikes, but help with all of the back-end operations that have allowed us to grow over the past 8 years. So as we hit mid-March, and it was very clear that the only thing we knew was there would be uncertainty and that schools were going to be closed for an extended amount of time, I was really faced with this kind of polar opposite situation where I wanted to make sure I protected my staff, but ultimately I also had to protect the organization. And if we weren't going to be in schools until August or September, best case, those were in direct conflict. So as we went on an extended spring break, I stepped back and tried to figure out what we could do to continue to serve the community and that would be able to create revenue just to be able to pay our monthly bills. And so within the space of about 48 hours, I went from being very concerned there would be staff that weren't coming back post-pandemic to building this model of being able to deliver food across central Indiana using our trucks and our trailers and our staff. And really in the space of less than 10 days, we went from first emails and discussions to moving about 150,000 pounds of food per week. And that's been the consistent volume for the past 8 weeks.
Talk about some of the partners that you have connected with in this process, some big names in the nonprofit space.
Yeah, so we've been working with Gleaners and Second Helpings and Indie Hunger Network, and they are really running the call center and then actually supplying us with the food. So when an individual calls the support number or texts Gleaners to the support number, it goes through a screening process and allows us to receive that information. And we are delivering food to the doorsteps of individuals that are immunocompromised or pregnant or considered high risk or have been told by a doctor to not leave their home, typically within about 24 hours of the request coming through the network system.
Well, I know once the need for the food subsides, you'll be pivoting back to your original mission there at 913 Sports. And Tom Hanley, thanks very much for joining us. Congrats on what you're doing. You're a good guy who does great things for the community, and I look forward to following and seeing your next step as well.
Thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate it.
All right, Tom. Well, up next, why it's more important than ever for Indiana businesses to step up to the plate to support some of the gems of the Hoosier economy, nonprofits. We'll talk with a special panel of experts when we come back. Well, this week, Indianapolis-based Eli Lilly and Company announced it will be working with the makers of the drug remdesivir to see if a certain drug combination will prove effective against severe cases of COVID-19. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration recently authorized emergency use for the antiviral medication, which is produced by California-based Gilead Sciences. New clinical trial will evaluate the safety and efficacy of a treatment regimen using remdesivir with a Lilly drug, a treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. Federal government says Indiana, one of just 13 states to receive shipments of remdesivir in the initial allocation. The study is double-blind, meaning neither trial investigators nor participants know who is receiving which treatment regimen. Well, as we have all experienced and witnessed, the pandemic is threatening all sectors of the economy, maybe none more than nonprofits. It presents the business community with a big challenge. What is the path forward to support and preserve Indiana charities? This week, we continue our bi-weekly segments, drilling down this week on being philanthropic when it is needed most. And I'm pleased to be joined by Kat Sapper and Miller Partner and KSM Location Advisor CEO Tim Cook. Also, the Associate Dean for Research and International Programs at the IU School of Philanthropy, Dr. Una Osili, and the co-founder of Launch Cause and Bloomerang, Jay Love. And welcome one and all to this special edition of our show. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. And Una, I want to start with you because this is what you do and what you are focused on. And philanthropy is, there's so many great assets here in Indianapolis regarding philanthropy. But talk about, if you would, the role that philanthropy plays during times of crisis, important year-round, but during a crisis, how important is philanthropy, and what lessons can we learn from past crises?
Thanks, first of all, for having us on the show today. I think it's important to state first that this is a crisis on a different scale. It is unprecedented in its impact, the impact it's having on our communities here in central Indiana. I also want to emphasize that it's not just a health crisis, it's also an economic crisis of proportions that we haven't seen before. And we are not out of the woods yet. We are just getting started. What we do know is that philanthropy can play a critical role in helping communities thrive and even rebuild in the face of crisis. We've seen that time and time again, beginning with 9/11, when we started tracking disasters, to even the most recent disaster, 2017, Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria. But I also want to stress this is not a natural disaster. It's still unfolding. What we have seen, I'll just mention 3 quick points. Philanthropy can be a unique collaborator. It does not displace government, but it can partner with government in unique ways. We've also seen philanthropy fill in the gaps, and especially here in central Indiana with feeding hungry families and school children, providing laptops for kids who are transitioning to virtual learning. We've seen philanthropy fill in those gaps. And finally, and importantly, philanthropy can also lift up the voices of the most vulnerable in our community. And those include communities of color who've been devastated by this pandemic, but also refugees, immigrant populations, seniors who are very vulnerable in this crisis. We've seen philanthropy be an advocate for the most marginalized. So lots of ways that philanthropy is connecting in this crisis.
Very good. Jay, you are an entrepreneur, an innovator, and really a committed person when it comes to the nonprofit sector. What are you telling your customers, your clients, those you mentor in the space? What are you telling them during this crisis?
The main thing is to continue communicating with all of your constituency. You've got to make sure that those people that have supported you in the past, whether you're a nonprofit that's on the front line, like some of our senior citizen centers, or a nonprofit that's just being affected by this, communication makes a big difference. We've been communicating with our customers and letting them know as we track the data coming through, those that have sent a crisis email in the last 6 weeks have actually raised 30 to 35% more funds than they did a year ago during this same time. Those that just sent any sort of communication are slightly ahead, but those where their boards or their senior leadership decided to stop communicating have had fairly drastic reductions in their revenue coming in. So it's a time to really spread out the wings and communicate with all of your followers.
Yeah, interesting perspective. Jay, Giving Tuesday took place last week, and some say the timing couldn't have been better. Can you tell us a little bit about Giving Tuesday and what impact you think it really had?
Right. Well, the Giving Tuesday organization was supported very strongly by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, among others. They decided to have a special Giving Tuesday. They refer to it as Giving Tuesday now, and it took place last Tuesday. And it was a tremendous boon for many of our customers and many nonprofits all across North America. For that, we think that the giving might be about 120% more, or 120% of what it was last December with the last Giving Tuesday. So America really did reach out and show its generosity.
Wow. Tim, KSM has been a corporate partner in Central Indiana for a long time, 80 years or so. Talk about, if you would, from your perspective, the important role the private sector has in this whole process when it comes to supporting nonprofits.
Yeah, Gary. Well, KSM, like so many of the great companies in Central Indiana and throughout the state, community is a core part of what our vision is and what our values are. And now more than ever, we have to be there for our not-for-profits. I think a lot of them are going to feel the pain of having to either postpone or cancel some of their big events where they are able to fundraise later in the year. And we are proactively reaching out to a lot of the not-for-profits that we're involved in to let them know that we're there, that we're going to continue to support them. In addition to that, we've had a community outreach committee for a number of years that's planned annual community days. We've kind of pivoted and formed a group called KSM Cares, where we're doing specific events surrounding the needs of our clients, the needs of our community. We participated in Takeout Tuesday this past Tuesday, and have got a number of different initiatives planned. So again, we're not unique. It's very endemic of the Central Indiana community that businesses step up, and I think you're seeing that in a big way right now.
Dr. Ossoly, in terms of, I'll give you the final word here, but in terms of what businesses can do right now as they seek to be a part of the solution to make a difference in the communities they serve, what advice do you have for businesses?
I think businesses can play a critical role. They can support nonprofits in their communities, either in kind, cash contributions, or just technical assistance. We can also see companies, many companies are reaching out here to support their employees. Their employees could be affected by any of things going on right now. So employee assistance, expanding that. And then finally, companies can look at all of their work and see how they can invest in their community right now. They're all needs that are emerging. Earlier on, it was mostly medical. We're seeing that economic. And we're seeing large companies. I think large companies can help, but small businesses can also look and see where they can retool, revamp, or just tweak their operations so they can support the needs that are emerging.
Dr. Una Ossoly, also Jay Love and Tim Cook, thank you all for some great perspective on an important topic, and that's supporting the nonprofit sector during the crisis. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, the COVID-19 Business Survival Series will continue here on the show and also in webinars. And you can also find more information at ksmcpa.com. And I'll be right back after this. And finally this week, the Indiana Independent Venue Alliance is hosting a virtual tribute event Sunday, this weekend, Sunday evening, to benefit Indiana music venues. Live music venues were to be the first closed, really, during the pandemic, and will be the last to open. These venues play a vital role in the state's culture and economy. Produced by three-time Emmy Award winner Matt Mays, Until We Meet Again provides an opportunity to meet and see faces behind the venues. The program will feature performances from local, regional, and national acts who have unique connections to these Hoosier stages. Fans can support the Alliance by donating during the show or purchasing Keep Indy Live merchandise. 100% of the proceeds will benefit the Indiana Independent Venue Alliance. And remember, you are not alone during this crisis. The hashtag #InThisTogether social distancing campaign aims to keep Hoosiers healthy and a return to safe social interactions. We'll see you next week.
Inside Indiana Business with Gary Dick is a production of Grow Indiana Media Ventures with support from WFYI Productions.